precursor fentanyl chemicals, right, coming into the U.S. and then transiting to Mexico, as strange as that sounds. A lot of the chemicals go directly from China to Mexico.
Right.
They also transit the United States by air freight and go to Mexico. So are there people synthesizing fentanyl in the United States?
Yeah.
Yes, there are. But the reality is that any amount of finished fentanyl that's not coming into the United States from Mexico is really inconsequential to our problem. The issue is the vast quantities of fentanyl that are coming into the U.S. from Mexico right now in the form of pills and powder.
Don't Hide the Scars, a weekly podcast focused on addiction and recovery. Created by the nonprofit PAIN, Parents and Addicts in Need, and founded by Flindt Andersen.
Special Agent in Charge, Bill Bodner, DA, Los Angeles Field Division. Thank you for joining founder of PAIN, Flindt Andersen, and myself, Jason LaChance, on Don't Hide the Scars.
Thank you for inviting me, guys.
You got it, Bill. We're so glad you're here, man. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I've seen you do so many different press-related stuff, but one of the interesting things that really caught me about your career, and we've been exploring further with some guests, is the occurrences shortly after NAFTA, and that's kind of when your career started.
Right.
What did you kind of see as a change in influx at that time?
You know, so people often ask me about smuggling over the border, and you know, my question back to them is, when do you think smuggling over the Mexico-U.S. border started? And the answer is about 15 minutes after it was declared a border. You know, I don't know when Prohibition was. 1919, 1920. Guess what? There was smuggling of tequila across the border. So smuggling of contraband across that border has always been a huge issue. NAFTA, to some extent, did have an effect because we saw more smuggling in commercial vehicles, tractor trailers carrying freight. Definitely, when I started the job, it was cocaine, and that's how a lot of it came across the border. Drugs mixed with legitimate goods coming across the border in tractor trailers.
Right. Yeah, I even remember those days, you know, where that was, you know, when I'd watch the news, you know, and that's where they'd find them. They'd find them in the wheel wells, you know, of the trucks and cars, and it was just, and they were getting a lot across.
Oh, yeah.
I can only imagine how much is getting across today with fentanyl.
Yeah, it's scary. I mean, that's the number one challenge I think we face in law enforcement right now is the volume of the drug, more than anything else, because fentanyl, it takes so little to kill you that there's really no room for error on anyone's part, especially law enforcement's part. So dealing with that volume, that much of a deadly substance is super challenging right now.
Well, you know, and I hear that there's like, again, I could be wrong, but 70,000 vehicles a day are crossing that border, going back and forth. So
here's the reality, and this is data that Department of Transportation publishes. So it's open, you know, on the internet. Right. The last time I looked at it was for May, so a couple months ago, May 2023. One border crossing in California, the San Isidro crossing, right? 1,345,000 vehicles coming from south to north, not both ways, just coming into the country. So take an average, guys. That's a vehicle every 2 seconds on average. So when I hear people talk about shutting down the border, and it's a discussion, right? It's a legitimate discussion, but I need to know what that means to you or what that means to the people saying it. What does that mean? Does that mean we spend 10 minutes searching every one of those 1.3 million cars? Because if it does, after 1 hour, that line to cross the border is now 9 hours long.
Right.
And there's people that live in northern Mexico that work in the United States that cross the border every single day. So, you know, just the magnitude of vehicles crossing that border, and that's where the smuggling is happening, in passenger cars and commercial trucks.
Yeah. No, I was going to say, you know, I mean, how do we stop that? How do we even check that? I mean, you could put 100,000 agents, you know, along that border, and you still wouldn't be able to get to all the vehicles.
A lot of it is really reliant on technology.
Yeah.
You know, X-rays, artificial intelligence to track smuggling networks, the vehicles they're using, who is in those vehicles, what other vehicles those people drive. AI in helping identify potential smuggling vehicles is something that is relied upon heavily, and it will be even more going forward. And you know, at the end of it, though, it takes human beings to search. It takes human beings to search, to recover the drugs, to document the evidence, et cetera. So that's another limiting factor.
What about the situations where it's a lot of the precursor chemicals? I mean, Flindt and I watched, was it the benzodope documentary, where we were seeing it, people ordering the precursor chemicals on the dark web. Are we seeing a lot of that coming across borders too? Or?
So it's interesting. We're seeing now precursor fentanyl chemicals, right, coming into the U.S. and then transiting to Mexico, as strange as that sounds. A lot of the chemicals go directly from China to Mexico. Right. They also transit the United States by air freight and go to Mexico. So are there people synthesizing fentanyl in the United States? Yeah. Yes, there are. But the reality is that any amount of finished fentanyl that's not coming into the United States from Mexico is really inconsequential to our problem. The issue is the vast quantities of fentanyl that are coming into the U.S. from Mexico right now in the form of pills and powder.
Okay. Yeah, I was really curious about that because we were watching, and there's a lady, gosh, what is she, second generation
drug dealer,
and was talking about how, her mom did it and how she's mixing it and everything else. So I was curious if that was an impactful problem, but.
I mean, so that's kind of, from that description, what you're saying, kind of like a mom and pop type operation. Yeah. And yeah, that does impact, you know what I mean?
Sure
but
does.
It's not, we're focusing on, our strategy is kind of focus on where the most harm is done. And the most harm is from Sinaloa cartel, Jalisco New Generation cartel, these groups, criminal groups in Mexico that are bringing 1 million pills into California across the border at a time. I mean, that's a significant amount of fentanyl when you consider that 60% of them right now, give or take, according to our laboratory testing, 60% of them contain 2 milligrams or more of fentanyl. So you can see the danger that these big organizations are creating here.
Yeah, and for those that don't understand, that 2 milligram mark is the mark of overdose.
Yeah.
You go to that 2 or over it, then your chances of overdose become even greater.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So can you tell us how much impact does the folks that are just coming over the border, what role do they play in a lot of this? And is it true that the cartels are actually targeting people that just want to come into the United States to bring it over?
So here's the thing: is there's no absolutes in drug trafficking, right? Like whatever smuggling method you can think of in your wildest imagination is probably happening. But again, we're focused on how a majority of the drugs are crossing the border. Majority of the drugs right now, fentanyl, methamphetamine, the synthetic drugs that are harming people, passenger vehicle, commercial truck. Are people walking across the border with drugs? Yes.
Sure.
It's not to the magnitude of the other things. So how does that migrant, I don't know what you want to call it, that migrant issue, how does that affect the drug issue? The only way it would affect it really is by diversion of resources. There's a limited amount of resources, federal agents. If you're diverting them to handle that issue, then they're not working the drug issue. And to some extent, I don't know to how great an extent, but to some extent that is going on right now.
Sure.
So as much like maybe in the, I'm sure people have seen it in documentaries or recreations, whatever it is, a lot of the drug mules, cocaine is the condoms and swallowing it, things like that. So they're going to find methods at the end of the day. That's just the reality.
Yeah. So they're going to find methods, but they're also going to use the most reliable methods that are working, that can get the largest volume of drugs across the border. And we have to be cognizant that as we address one issue, it's almost like holding a bubble underwater. Right? So let's say we could instantly search every car at the ports of entry through whatever means. We have the ability to do that now. What's going to happen? Boats. We're going to see more ships coming up the coast of California then. We're going to see an increase in tunnels. We're going to see more drones or small aircraft flying drugs across the border. So there is no one simple solution to it. It has to be all-encompassing, because whatever method they encounter the least resistance, that's the way they're going to go.
Sure.
Well, and again, a lot of this boils down to money, because they're going to take that chance.
Yeah.
Because the risk versus reward.
Yeah.
Yeah,
the risk versus reward and the profitability. I mean, you're talking about pills that cost, 13 cents. Yeah. Like a fake oxy costs 13 cents to produce, and they were selling up here 2 years ago for maybe $20. Right. Now it's down to a couple bucks. There's so many of them. But look at the profitability in that. And if you lose 100,000 of them, you'll make more. You know, that's the kind of one of the key points about why fentanyl and even methamphetamine is so devastating is they found a way to take Mother Nature out of the equation, right? So, you know, to grow poppy plants in Mexico, you have to control, if you're a drug cartel, right, a specific area of the country where the climate is conducive to growing that crop. And then you have to have gunmen there to protect it. And you have to have laborers to work the fields, very labor intensive. You know, they're scoring the poppies, scraping the gum. All those things require manpower, sometimes violence, whatever. A synthetic drug, you don't have to do any of that. You could have a fentanyl laboratory in a garage somewhere, and as long as you get the chemicals, you could move it to any part of the country that you control. So much easier to scale that type of business and not rely on Mother Nature. Yeah.
You know, when you're talking about that, and I know I've talked to a couple other guys about this, the heroin issue as well. Do you actually see heroin being non-existent in the next few years?
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here's the thing: in some cities in the United States, like I know Philadelphia right now, huge problem with fentanyl, xylazine right now. Right. Extremely difficult to find just regular heroin on the street. So, you know, tell me, what is the user going to do in that situation?
Go to fentanyl.
They're going to go to fentanyl.
Every time.
Yeah. And so that's why, like, a lot of times I feel like, you know, like some of our harm reduction efforts are a couple years lagging. For instance, fentanyl test strips. Yes, if there were people 3 years ago that had the option of using heroin or fentanyl, right? Mm-hmm. That option, let's say that option existed a few years ago. A test strip to them might be valuable. They can make the determination, hey, I just want to stick to heroin, which I know I'm comfortable with, etc. Fentanyl test strips today, there's people are seeking out fentanyl. It's all that's available. So you know, you're not testing it because you're happy to just get something. I hate to say it like that, but that's the reality.
No, that is the reality. You know, and it's interesting you said that because I didn't think about that. Because when it comes to fentanyl test strips, I got to tell you, I'm against them, and I'm going to give you my reason. Because I think what we're doing is we're sending the wrong message to our kids.
Right.
Most of the time, it's people that have lost a child, and again, we all grieve for that child and that family. But what kind of message are we sending to little 15-year-old Billy here that says, oh, it's okay to do your cocaine on Saturday night. Right. Here's a fentanyl test strip just to make sure there's no fentanyl in it.
Right.
I mean, it's the devil on one shoulder, angel on the other kind of scenario.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that scenario you brought up, though, talking about cocaine, because I've always said, and hey, I'm not, you know, I kind of probably have almost the same opinion you do about it, but the person using cocaine wants nothing to do with an opiate.
Correct.
Right? Yes. If there's any value in a fentanyl test strip, that's where it is. Now, a couple things on that. When we see overdose clusters, like the well-known case was in Florida about 2 years ago, the West Point cadets that were on spring break, and 3 or 4 of them overdosed. We had comedians in Venice, California, down in the LA area. 3 died, 1 survived. Again, cocaine. So in that situation, for someone who's not seeking out the drug, will a fentanyl test strip take what I call the deception piece out of it? I think it would.
I think it would too.
But I think one place we've been successful, and it's probably because of the age group of cocaine users now. Like and again, no absolutes, right? But I classify like the coke user as maybe the recreational drug user. And in the LA area that I'm familiar with, that's someone who's, you know, 30s, 40s. They don't think they have a drug problem. They're someone who's going to do coke once a month, twice a month. They're so afraid of fentanyl now that they've actually stopped using fentanyl, and they're so afraid of cocaine now because of the potential mixture or mistaken for fentanyl that they've stopped using cocaine and they've moved to other drugs. And that's caused a crash in the price of cocaine, where the price is lower in LA now than it's been in probably 20 years. In some places in the country, it's the lowest it's ever been.
No kidding.
But that goes to show that we can reach that 30, 40-something age group. Sure. You know, where we don't have the success is the teenage to 25 age group.
New Perceptions North, the premier drug and alcohol treatment and recovery center in Central California. A full continuum of medically supervised, top-quality care with programs for detox, inpatient residential treatment with dual diagnosis, intensive outpatient treatment, sober living, support groups, and more. With 50-plus years of combined experience and sobriety, Flindt, Andersen, and Thelma Gatlin Wilson provide adult men and women with the highest caliber of professional health care, treating each client with compassion and respect, and a safe, comfortable environment. To begin the process of recovery, to proudly create and sustain a life without addiction, call 559-978-1507 or visit newperceptionsnorth.com.
I heard you gentlemen talk before we came in and sat down, you know. Flindt speaks. I was telling you I go speak at high schools, and they're aware of it. Mm-hmm. They're really aware. But it's like they just don't care.
Yeah.
Or it's that mentality, Flindt, I'll talk about that youth, you know I was indestructible at one point.
Superman complex.
So yeah, here's the thing. Are we saying that drug experimentation by teenagers is new?
No.
No, we're not saying that. But are we saying that drug experimentation by teenagers has never been as dangerous as it is today?
Correct.
Right. So how do you get that message to kids that you know, one use of the drug could be all it takes?
Yeah, you know, I was speaking at a Boys and Girls Club thing, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, and there was this one young lady. She was 14, and she just had attitude all over the place. Like this old bastard has no idea what he's talking about. Right?
Yeah.
And I obviously I picked up on her, and I looked at her and I said, "Listen, young lady," I said, "I'm not your parent. I said, I'm not your teacher. I'm not your counselor. All right, and I'm not telling you what to do. I'm telling you what's going to happen to you if you decide to go down this road."
Right.
You know, because the message we have to send to kids is not, don't do that.
Right.
Because they're going to go, you know what they're going to do.
Yeah.
Right? The other part of that piece, and this is what I've been battling with for 15 years, is getting the parents in the room, at least getting them in the room to start to listen to what we have to say. When we're dealing with parents, at least in this area, the best place to get to parents is through the school districts.
Right.
And school districts will not, they don't even want to hold a drug talk to their parents of their schools.
Yep.
Especially the affluent areas.
Especially the affluent.
Hey, so it's my experience is it's we're seeing progress in that area, but I can tell you 100% agree with what you just said. In 2019, we were doing a pretty big event for schools, and many school districts said, hey, we don't want the parents to think there's a drug problem in the school.
Right.
If someone from DEA is talking, you know, we don't want to participate in that. Then there's 3 overdoses, and they're calling us literally the next day, hey, can we, you know, partner or do some collaboration on something? So yeah, my ideal situation, and we have yet to pull it off yet, is Monday night you have a meeting after school hours with the parents, and you say, here's what's going to happen tomorrow. We're going to have an assembly for the kids. We're going to go over, this is what we're going to explain to your children. Educate the parents first, and the next day you do it for the kids, and then hopefully they can have a conversation at some point, you know, both being educated. Because what I used to tell parents is, hey, just talk to your children. I was naive, right? Because, hey, I'm a DEA agent. I have somewhat of an idea what's going on. I thought everybody did, but I'm telling parents to talk to their kids, and they have no clue what's happening. Yeah. So we have to educate the parents first, then educate the children, and hopefully do something to facilitate the one-on-one discussion between them, absent us, right? That's my feel of what would work.
Absolutely. You know, and locally, I got to say, we've done an amazing job. Our law enforcement here has done an amazing job of going and talking to these kids. We as a whole, this kind of group that we're in, have made this awareness piece remarkable here. And I'm sure in other areas as well, too. But I think where we fall short a little bit here is giving parents a better answer to some of the tougher questions. You know, how do we get help for our son if our son is going into this? How do we give help to a 17-year-old?
Yeah.
When there is maybe 2 to 3 treatment facilities in the state of California that will take minors. Until everybody starts to understand how treatment works and how it works on the opioid addict and the and by the way, methamphetamine, cocaine addicts, even if they have insurance, insurance does not cover that detox.
Yeah. Yeah, this is, man, an issue that comes up all the time with us is treatment challenges. So my understanding is that if you're a teenager in California, you can walk out of a treatment facility at any time.
Yes, you can.
You can.
Yeah.
And I mean, so the parents that I've talked to who have children who are in recovery now, first thing was it was 6-month inpatient treatment, which again, I'm not an expert on this, but in my experience talking with parents, insurance companies are not paying for that.
Will not
pay for that. Problem number one. And guess where they're sending their children then? To Mexico, to treatment facilities in Mexico where they can't leave. They're just not allowed to leave, and it's 6-month treatment. You know, I mean, that's kind of ironic, right? That the best we can do is 30-day in-house treatment here. It's like that's not even realistically giving. I don't know. You know better than me. You tell me. Is that giving people the tools they need?
No.
No.
I
don't think so.
Flat out no.
Yeah.
And insurance companies now, not in every case. But in a lot of them, I would say maybe 60% of the cases now, they're knocking the time down to 17 to 20 days.
Yeah.
Not even the 30. It takes 30 days to get the drug out of one's system.
Right.
And for that brain to even start to try to comprehend what a counselor or a therapist is telling them. You know, it takes 2 to 4 years for sleep patterns to come back.
Wow.
It takes 2 to 4 years for dopamine to return to normal and serotonin levels to return to normal. So how do we expect, especially a young kid, when the human brain becomes fully mature at 26?
Yep.
That's without drugs and alcohol, by the way. So what kind of results are we expecting here? Yeah. You know, so we've got to get the insurance companies on board, but that's going to be a tough road.
No, but I see that as a major thing. And the other thing that I learned a lot about, and actually DEA is going through it right now, when I first heard about it, I thought like, oh, this is like buprenorphine.
Right.
Like, how come everybody's not on buprenorphine? You know, why isn't, well, first you have to get the fentanyl out of your system for a couple days before you can take Suboxone.
Got to be in full withdrawal.
That's it.
Right.
Then you got to probably take Suboxone for, I don't know, a couple of weeks before getting, what is it, Sublocade or whatever the injection is?
Sublocade.
Sublocade. So there's a little bit more to it than naive people like me thought. You know, I thought, hey, there's homeless people, let's bring treatment out to them. It's not that simple, though, because it's really a nuanced, I learned, you already knew this, it's really a nuanced thing, and it's difficult right now to make it work.
It is. And the other part of the buprenorphine, methadone combination is, look, it took me 2 years to get off of methadone.
Wow.
And I did it myself. I did not, I mean, I went to a clinic, right?
Yeah.
But I went down, I think it was 1 milligram every 2 weeks, right? They started me at 190 milligrams, which is the top legal dose, at least at the time it was. I was falling asleep at traffic lights. I'm not exaggerating here. You talk about the constipation that goes with it. You talk about all the health issues that come along with long-term methadone and buprenorphine use. It's amazing. And I've had basically all of them. But what we're doing, again, this is just my opinion, but what we're doing, buprenorphine is a great drug to detox with and to use for about 4 weeks. After that 4 weeks, you are now dependent on Suboxone, buprenorphine, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
And with methadone, do you know, as a treatment, I own a treatment facility, we can't even take a methadone client into our treatment program because we can't have it on site.
Right.
DEA runs the show here with this, right?
Yep.
So even if we took somebody, we would not take somebody unless they were at a minimum of 20 milligrams. And at 20 milligrams, it's going to take that person about 4 months to come off of it properly. When I decided to do it too fast, I went into a psychotic break.
Wow.
That happens constantly. The buprenorphine and the methadone, buprenorphine's better than methadone. Mm-hmm. Methadone to me is the devil's drug. It's the hardest drug to come off of. By far, you can't do it on your own. you're going to have to wean yourself down all the way with this. So again, in my opinion, we are now. Why should we put a 25-year-old on a drug that they're going to be strapped to? And you know the rules with methadone. You can't go to San Francisco. If you're in San Francisco for the day and you forgot your methadone, you can't walk into a clinic and get it in San Francisco. Right. You're going to be going through withdrawals almost about maybe an hour after your last dose. If you don't, I mean, I'm sorry. It goes about 24 hours for the dose, and then when you get to that 24th hour, if you don't have it, you're going to go into withdrawals. Right. You're going to leave San Francisco or wherever you're at to come home to get it. Wow. Because the rules are just too tough. Right. And do we want to strap a 25-year-old to that for the rest of their life?
That's the other question.
That's the other question.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's scary. I think the other issue, Bill, as I was telling you, when I go in and speak to the classrooms and the kids, that's what I was thinking of. I went golfing with my friend and his daughter the other day. Flint's been pushing me. You do a lot with the recovery people. Do something for yourself. So I got out golfing, and
good advice.
His daughter's a senior in high school, getting ready to go off play golf in college. And I was asking her, who's coming and talking at your school, about the fentanyl issue? Nobody. Yep. But then her dad's like, well, tell me more. The child knew more than he did.
Common.
Yeah. And then when I go in and I talk to these kids and they're, I thank you, Mr. LaChance, really appreciate, thanks for sharing your story. You've told me, now I'm real educated, then what's my solution to deal with these problems that I'm having? And that's the greatest thing that I'm seeing, as you and I know firsthand, why we're turning to the substance is the underneath something, and I don't think there's a solid solution for them. Like, what if their parents are the problem? Well, they can't go into the school counselor and tell the school counselor, and the parents can request the meeting notes, and that's what I'm seeing a lot of.
I see that too, self-medication. I mean, a lot of times teenagers with self-medication is the huge issue, and they can't speak with their parents about it, or they feel they can't speak to their parents about it. So what do? They hear from a friend, or they hear from their social group that Xanax can help them deal with the anxiety or the stress. They're not going to get a prescription from a doctor because they'd have to go with their parents. They turn to social media. They buy a pill that 100% of the time now is fake. And a lot of times I'll say that to people. I'll say, hey, all the pills on the street are fake right now. And they're like, well, how can you say that? You can't say that. All I know is we test them. Right. We actually send the pill. We get 1 million pills. We send them to the lab and we test them. And it's been literally years since we've seen a pill that was purchased, like our undercover purchased on social media or something, that's had real pharmaceutical ingredients in it. And most of the times, the fake bars, the fake Xanax pills, are just fentanyl with some other stuff in them. Sure. So you're giving, you're not giving that. So a child is seeking that out to self-medicate, and it has deadly consequences. How do you take the stigma away from mental health, and how do you empower teenagers to speak to someone about mental health issues? Hey, I wish I had the answer to that. That's kind of out of my league, but I see that as a major problem where if you ask a parent, where's the safest place for your child, they're probably going to say right here at home. And do you know how many cases I've seen where a child kisses his mom and dad goodnight, goes upstairs, and takes a pill by his or herself in the bedroom and is dead the next morning? Like, it's happening every day. And why is that? It's, society's not doing a good enough job at identifying what's causing this teen to reach out for those drugs, to seek those drugs out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing too is we deal with the media a lot here. And one thing, look, the media for the most part, I think does an adequate job. I don't think they do a good job or a fantastic job at all. Yeah. And one of the reasons being, they'll come in here and they'll do a piece, or a celebrity has died, like we were talking about, and they'll interview us about this. But here's what'll happen. They come in, they do the interview, their cameras, then as they're talking to me, then their cameras will put B-roll on that goes right to the homeless guy with no teeth living under the bridge. Yeah. And everybody that's living north of Herndon Avenue shuts off their television, or that's not my kid, that's not my family. So there's a mixed message, if that's the right way to say it, that I think is going on.
If you or a loved one is struggling with addiction, please call Parents and Addicts in Need at 559-579-1551 or check us out online at painnonprofit.org. Follow us on social media at Pain Nonprofit. Please subscribe to the podcast and share with others wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube. To donate, please click the link in the description and help us save more lives gripped by addiction.
Hey, that's a fascinating thing you just brought up. Here's what I tell people to try to overcome that. And if you disagree with me, please tell me, right? I'm 56. 20 years ago, it was easy for us as a society to identify people who were at risk of a drug-caused death because they were the people that were suffering from opiate use disorder. They were generally injecting heroin every day. We knew those are the people that were at risk. The game is 100% different today. Now we have, earlier I spoke about experimental drug users, recreational drug users. Now everyone is at that same level of risk. Literally,
yes.
Literally a teenager is at the same risk of death, I would argue, right, and hear me out, is at the same risk of death from fentanyl poisoning as a daily opiate addict. The opiate addict has a tolerance to the drug. The opiate addict is savvy in the drug market, generally knows, has a pretty good idea of what he or she is getting. Sometimes with a teenager, none of that is happening. They honestly think it's the deception piece, and it's getting smaller, right? We're educating people, and now kids do, I hope for the most part, know that there's fentanyl in these pills, but there are still some kids that think this is a real Xanax, think it's a real perk, and they're taking the pills without even knowing what they are. And they weigh 110 pounds. They've never used an opiate before. How much does it take to kill them compared to the suffering addict who's been taking it every single day for 2 years? So what I say now is, if you're taking drugs today, you're at risk. It's not, you can't just say it's only, like you talked about showing the picture of the homeless people. Yeah, that's a part of the problem. That's always been a part of the problem. We got to do better at getting help for those people. But the problem today, and part of the reason why the deaths have escalated exponentially, is the other groups that are now at risk.
Yes. Yeah. The simple answer is yes, I agree with you. But I'm going to even break it down a little bit further. Mm-hmm. And I agree with everything you said. I think the 13, 14, 15-year-old is in that category of not thinking that there's fentanyl in that Xanax. I think, and I hate to even say this, but the semi-experienced drug user at 15, 16, and 17, they don't care that fentanyl's in there.
Right.
So we almost have to break this down into categories, like we have to break down treatment. And what I mean by that is that you have people with PPO insurances and that can afford the cash to go into treatment facilities. Then you have the homeless or whoever it might be that only have Medi-Cal for the state of California. As a private treatment facility, we don't take Medi-Cal. We're trying to get it for our outpatient programs, but for inpatient, we can't take it because they pay $180 a day.
Yeah.
So the people that have the Medi-Cal, they're not getting a quality of care that they deserve. Mm-hmm. So again, it's everything needs to be, at least in my opinion, needs to be broken down into all these little categories in order for us to address it the proper way.
Yep.
And Sacramento is not listening.
Right.
They're just simply not listening.
Right.
Well, not to guys like us.
Well, no, of course not. But I don't even think they're listening to folks like you.
No.
They just don't care.
No.
I think is
I don't know what the issue is, but what I do know is when I tune out anytime someone proposes the one solution that's going to cure everything.
Of course.
And hey, that can even be law enforcement. That's obviously not the one solution.
Right.
And how do I know that? I've seen it firsthand. Like if I had to say what's most important right now, and we're kind of getting to a tipping point, like you spoke of now, maybe the ages 13, 14 are naive and they don't know what's in the pills. I wish we could educate everybody so that at least they were empowered with the knowledge to make a decision. If they're making the wrong decision, then you have to address that bucket, like you're saying. Yeah. But yeah, things need to be broken down like that. And there is no, it's not, you know, I get very frustrated when I hear law enforcement isn't the answer, this is the answer. Or that's not the answer, law enforcement is the answer. Everything is the answer. Right. People just need to focus on what they do, what their role is.
And what we do best.
That's it.
Stay in your lanes.
That's it. And push, you know?
Yeah.
Exactly. You know, that brings up another point. And I knew we were going to get to this because I wasn't going to let it go. I think I already know what your opinion is on putting drug dealers in prison.
Yeah.
But so for our listeners, I really want to hear
we have to do it. And listen, I understand we're in California and there is a group, not even a group, there's a sentiment that we don't want to incarcerate people, period, right?
Right.
Here's the reality of drug trafficking and where harm is caused. And I talk about one case in particular, not because I'm like cherry picking this one time this happened. This happens every week. It's just this case is done with. Person pled guilty, been sentenced, so we can talk about it without getting, you know, any legal issues. September of 2020 in Pasadena, California, one drug dealer in one weekend caused 7 overdoses and 3 deaths. So, what happens next weekend?
He got let out.
No, what happens next weekend? If law enforcement's not going to incarcerate him, what happens next weekend?
More.
Like there's a cycle. See, drug trafficking is not a crime of passion. It's a greed-driven crime, right? So there's a cycle. Greed, harm. Greed, drug trafficking, harm. So unless law enforcement steps in and files a criminal case on that person, and in that case we were very lucky, you know, the local police did a phenomenal job and we partnered with them to get this person off the street in probably like 4 or 5 days.
Nice.
But there would have been more harm the next weekend. And people have to realize that it's not like, hey, this was just a one-time thing and it'll never happen again. You know, it was not a crime of passion. They're going to keep selling drugs until they're stopped. Yeah. And that's where law enforcement has to step in and say, no, I don't care about recidivism. I don't care about any of that. What I care about is you pose a threat to the community. Your behavior has harmed people. Your behavior is not going to stop unless law enforcement intervenes, and that's why the law enforcement piece is so important in this.
Absolutely.
That is a great way to put that. Yeah. I hadn't thought of it in those terms.
Well, and we get so frustrated with you. I know you've heard it, the decriminalization, and it's and
hey, xylozine's not a controlled substance, folks.
Yeah.
Right.
How's that working out?
Yeah.
Exactly.
And it's like I say, like, okay, I get it. You what you're wanting to talk about is that for the addict themselves.
Yes.
It is not a moral failure to be an addict. I get it.
Yeah. Who disagrees with that?
I understand. But if I went and robbed someone at gunpoint to get my fix, I've just now committed a criminal act. My addiction doesn't matter at all.
This is a real case that I found so disturbing, right? A person at an in-treatment facility orders drugs, orders fentanyl, gets it delivered by an Uber. And we charged this case a couple months ago. There was a big media release down in L.A. The drugs are delivered by Uber, and there's video of the treatment facility, like the security cameras outside. You can see the Uber pull up. The guy gets the drugs back inside. He's dead the next morning. Do you want someone on the street that's preying upon people that are in treatment, selling drugs to people that are in treatment? Like, what chance does someone have trying to get clean when there's someone that's predatory, right, and that's drug dealer knew this person was at a treatment facility. Right. It's like, you know, how can we allow that as a society? How on the one hand can you say we got to get people into treatment, but it's okay that this guy is literally sending delivery drivers with fentanyl to the treatment facility? You can't have it like that, man.
No, and yeah, well, again, I've got my own personal thoughts on what we do to that guy.
Yeah.
You know, but
remember the law.
I'm trying. I'm trying. But I also have to add just a little something to that. That treatment center, and I know there's some treatment centers out there that are a little on the shady side.
Yep.
There's always going to be that.
I see that too.
That. But for that treatment center to even allow an Uber driver to show up and to knock on that door or to do whatever it is to not have that security around that, to even have that client use their phone to make a phone call without somebody at minimum being next to them listening to that phone call. Because at our treatment center, all those protocols are in place.
Yep.
They can't even make a phone call unless you've been there, I think it's 2 weeks. And they can't make a phone call unless there's a staff member next to them. You know, so again,
a breakdown. That's a breakdown.
It's a breakdown of their system there. But what a shame.
Yeah.
Because again, folks don't. I mean, you do, and a lot of people do, but a lot of people don't. They don't understand the addict's brain. They don't understand how it works. I was going to tell you this a little earlier. You know, if I'm watching, I've got 23 years in of sobriety. If I'm watching a show of the old Dr. House, remember that show? Yeah. Okay. You know, and he reaches in that pocket and he pulls out that bottle of blanket and he shakes it a little bit like this. Okay. Right. Yeah. And I don't know that scene is coming.
Yeah, you're
going the way he does it, I'm getting goosebumps right now.
Yeah, I know, man. You're going to get a feeling.
Okay?
Yeah.
I got that feeling, right? But because of 23 years, I know where to take that feeling.
Right.
Right. If you're 6 months in, even a year in, even 5 years in, sometimes you don't yet know where to take that.
Wow.
And you don't know where to take that feeling. Right? And I guess one of the reasons why I'm saying that is that there's no cure for this addiction. And I think a lot of parents think there is when their kids fall into this trap. They're going to go to treatment. 30 days is going to fix them. They're going to come out. And every parent's on board in the beginning. Yeah, Flindt, we're going to listen to everything you have to say. We're going to listen to everything your staff has to say. Blah, 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 on and on. And I'm going, time out. I'm going, this is just the beginning. This is just the beginning. There is no cure. Do you know if I pull up to a gas station today and I'm putting gas in my truck and there's ether and gasoline, right? You don't smell it very often.
Yeah.
But every now and then I catch a whiff of that ether, I got to move my truck. Because as a kid, I had 17 surgeries from the time I was born to the time I was 18. And they used ether in the early days. And that takes that memory bank all the way back.
Smell is powerful, man.
It's powerful. Yeah. And that's my point. That thought process that we have as an opiate addict, it doesn't go away. For some reason, it's the high, it's that sensation that we continually want.
Right.
Right? We have to learn how to live without that. And it takes time. It takes a lot of time. And again, nothing against the people, because most people shouldn't know about this.
Yeah.
But they don't. And that's why I'm not just sitting here promoting longer treatment for shits and grins.
Yeah.
Okay? I'm promoting it because it's necessary. If we are going to at least have a shot at helping this generation, we have to be able to not have our hands tied in treatment in order to do it. And then again, what comes first with mental health? Is it a drug addiction? Is it the chicken or the egg?
Yeah. Yeah, I know where you're going with that.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. I mean, hey, we've become a society that's very, and I think this is where you were going with that. We've become a society that's very trusting of prescription drugs.
You bet.
And there's a pill for everything. So when you're 15 years old, hey, it's okay to take a pill for this, you know. Right. It's acceptable.
I mean, mom's got them in the medicine cabinet. She's taking them over. How can that hurt me?
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. That's a bigger problem than I think we all realize. Yeah.
You bet it is.
Yeah.
And I do want to say this about you guys and DEA and law enforcement in general. You know, when I hear of busts that you're getting 100,000 pills off the street, and you got some other idiot in the corner over here going, oh, they're not doing it, they're not getting it done. Let me tell you something. That 100,000 pills, you good people got off the street. That saved a few lives.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and that's the way we look at it.
That's the way we have to look at it.
You cannot deny that when you reduce the quantity of drugs, you're reducing the harm.
Yeah.
If nothing else, right? So that's what we do. We're reducing the quantity of drugs on the street, and hopefully, I would say empirically, it's proven that when we do that, it reduces the harm. And when I say it's proven, I look back to prescription drugs. The height of prescription opioid abuse, or I guess the highest number of prescriptions written for opioids in this country. I want to say it was 2012 or 2013. It was 255 million prescriptions for opiate drugs.
You're right.
And so what we saw was a lot of people harmed by prescription opioids. As the prescription number came down over, what's it been, 10 11 years since then, the number of people harmed by prescription opioids went down. But unfortunately, you know, the drug cartels stepped in to fill that void, and they said, hey, there's a market for these blue M30 pills, the oxy pills that are out there today. Everybody wants them. Let's just create our own and fill that void. And that's what happened. Yeah. But you know, we know that reducing the supply of drugs reduces the harm. So we're out there doing that every day. And I appreciate you saying that you feel that that has an impact, because everyone that works at DEA, we know that has an impact. Yeah. And we know that we're saving lives every day by doing that.
You bet.
And you touch on something that I was curious about asking about was, you know, when your career started, seeing that evolution out of the opioid crisis, because I mean, you know, Flindt and I have tracked it. We've seen it, read it in literature and documentaries, and spoken with people to see how that, you know, legal supply dried up and the people turning to that illicit supply. And this fentanyl crisis is just that next evolution.
That's all it is. Yeah, it's I don't know, savvy maybe, or entrepreneurial or enterprising drug traffickers that saw, hey, this product is really in demand, right? The pills, the supply is being cut. Let's step in and make our own and flood the market with them and take over the market. And that's really what they did. And you know, I look back to, I think Prince was probably the first high-profile celebrity that died. You know, blue M30 fentanyl pills. Right. And back then, it was like really everyone thought they were real, thought it was real pills, you know? They didn't know that there was this whole other drug out there, fentanyl. Fentanyl is not new.
Oh, it's not.
It's not new.
No,
like,
it's not.
I remember when I first started with DEA, there was a thing called, and it's pretty, there's a lot of stuff online about it. It was called Tango and Cash Heroin in New York City. Huh. And what was Tango and Cash Heroin? It was like February of 1991, and there was this heroin that was killing people in New York City. But dozens of people. I mean, now we have that, you know, that's nothing now. There's more people dying in New York on a regular weekend today from drugs than this, yet this was a public health emergency there. They had police cars going up and down the street saying, don't use the Tango and Cash heroin, because it's kind of brand named heroin back then. And all it was illicitly manufactured fentanyl in some underground lab in the U.S. mixed with heroin. And it killed dozens of people. And people say, like, well, how come it didn't kill thousands like today? Volume. It's like I said, it was just one guy doing it, one thing, and trying this experimental thing. Today we just have literally thousands of kilos of it coming into our country.
Well, you know, and there's other drugs out there. Look, most of these drugs were invented, created, whatever you want to say, back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. A lot of those drugs are just sitting dormant, just waiting for somebody like China to get their hands on them. You know, and speaking of that, how much do you think China's role in this plays?
It's huge.
It's got to be.
It's huge. I mean, you know, most of the precursor chemicals to make fentanyl and methamphetamine come from China. And hey, we're talking a lot about methamphetamine, but you alluded to, I mean, I'm sorry, we're talking a lot about fentanyl, obviously, but you mentioned methamphetamine earlier, and from my point of view, I see, this is probably going to take some explaining, but I see the harm from methamphetamine being just as great.
Absolutely.
As caused by fentanyl. It's just different harm. Like, you're not dying today. We track who dies from drug-caused death and the type of drug that kills them. And you can kind of break it into age groups, and you can see with fentanyl, it'll start at 14 years old, and it'll peak around 24 to 35, and then it tapers off. Believe it or not. That's how it is today. That may change over the next 10 years or whatever, but it tapers off. Methamphetamine is different. It starts slower, but it just can, like 35, then straight to 45, straight to 55. You're taking that drug for 15, 20 years, you're addicted. And it's not killing you today, but what is it doing? You're going to have mental health issues. You're going to be homeless. It's going to create all the other social issues that we see, in our community right now. That's methamphetamine that's doing that for us, It might not kill you today, but it'll wreck your life, and it'll be just as great a cost on society, what that drug does to you.
You bet. Yeah. We say in recovery, there are worse things to us addicts than death. And one of them is long-term addiction.
Yep.
Because there are people, I went over 20 years with my addiction. Oh yeah. It was 20 years. You can live through most of it, right? But there always comes that point, I call it the imaginary line, where when you cross that line, you're now in it.
Yeah.
You're now in it for the duration. And you don't know how to get out of it at that point.
Yeah.
And so you keep going. There were times when I would pray for death because my day was, I had a legal support service business. So that means I was serving subpoenas, I was serving kick-out orders, summons and complaints, doing court filings for every attorney west of the Mississippi River, right? And I had a staff and all that. But I had to do that, and I had to get 70 pills a day.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. It was this.
Here's something I heard, and a lot of times when I meet someone who's been in recovery for 20, 25 years now, I ask them this question. I say, if you were using today with fentanyl out there, what would happen? And they just say, I'd be dead.
I'd be dead.
And you think the same thing?
Same
yeah.
thing.
That's
Absolutely,
what everybody
no
tells me. Yeah, that's amazing.
No
Another thing that I've heard is, so speaking to someone who used heroin regularly, right? And said, hey, I was a heroin addict, but I could function. I could hold down a job. I could go to work. When I couldn't get heroin anymore and I started using fentanyl, I could not hold down a job anymore. And I don't know if it's because the high is different and you have to use much more frequently or whatever the case, but they just said, hey, it changed for me when I started using fentanyl, even from heroin to fentanyl.
Here's why.
Yeah.
Here's why. First of all, the statement that was made that I was a functioning addict, we're never a functioning addict. We have moments of functioning. But again, here comes that imaginary line, where once you go over that, you're not functioning. And I'm talking about like I don't know the time frame. The last, if you put it in 4 quarters, it'd be the 4th quarter that you are no longer functioning. But you think you are. So you are still working. You are still doing those things, just not doing it well. But with fentanyl, because it's so short acting, see, heroin's lasts longer.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Fentanyl's short acting. That means we have to have more and more of it. If I took fentanyl right now at whatever time it is, 11 o'clock.
Yeah.
By 12:15.
Yeah.
Maybe even a little earlier, I'd have to use again. Okay, so now what happens is that you're on the clock. Time means everything in addiction. Time means everything, all the way up to when it stands still. And what I mean by that is in between this is very difficult to explain. But if I'm in bed and I took my last dose at 11 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
and now it's 12 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
and I'm starting to go through some minor withdrawal symptoms because I know I can't get any until the next morning. I'm not going to sleep. I'm going into withdrawals. Everything's discombobulated. Everything's upside down. And I think I fall asleep for a little bit. And I wake up and I look at the clock and it's 12:01.
Oh.
No.
That's what I mean by time stands still
Wow.
between the using when you are neck deep in it.
Right.
Well, and then from the people we've spoken to, when it comes to like the benzo dope, it gives it the longer legs.
The longer legs.
And xylazine too.
And
that's
xylazine
the other
gets
thing,
longer
like
legs,
that
yeah.
people, again, when we talk about like being a little, I think there's a perception, some people have the perception that the fentanyl user doesn't want to use xylazine. And I'm like, no, actually the fentanyl user does want to use xylazine because that's going to get them through the next couple hours.
Absolutely. And
that's like one of the frustrations I have is that, like, hey, we need to test for xylazine. And it's like the people want it. That's the issue. You need to just understand that if you're using fentanyl, and you're down that road, you're probably going to want a benzo or a xylazine mixed with it.
Right.
Yeah, and the consequence of, you know, a limb starting to rot or anything,
it's gruesome,
what, I forget which one we were watching, and the lady's, you know, talking with the gentleman trying to clean up the wounds, and it's not even in his head. It's like he understands that this is what's going to occur, but it's not even in there. The consequence, that part of the brain is off.
Right.
Yeah. And I don't know if you heard this prior to, I was telling these guys that, and in treatment now, what that does is because fentanyl is mixed with xylazine and with benzos, in treatment now we have to have 2 or 3 different protocol detoxes, because you can't detox it the same.
That's interesting.
They're separate. They're separate drugs. They're separate makeups to those drugs.
Right.
You know, so it makes it even tougher.
Yeah, and you know, like I said, xylazine not a scheduled drug, so technically not illegal by federal standard. Right. There's a lot of benzos now that are designer benzos that are not actually scheduled, that are, quote, legal, like atizolam. There's a couple other ones that we don't see them too much. Like, we don't see benzos. And remember, when this is a caveat I have to give people, because a lot of times they'll ask me about what's in the drug supply chain.
Sure.
Remember that we work primarily at the wholesale level, right? And a lot of these cocktails, like xylazine being mixed with fentanyl, a lot of time that's done very close to street distribution. So sometimes we don't have the best visibility on that. With pills, though, and it stays consistent throughout the United States, about 8% of the pills have xylazine in them right now. So fentanyl and xylazine, and again, it's to give it that little bit of extra, you know, to make it maybe seem a little bit more like an oxy would seem. You know.
Have you guys ever seen a drug called Soma out there?
Yeah. That was the big. There used to be. Let's see if I can get this right. There was a drug called the Holy. There was a combination called the Holy Trinity, which was an opiate, a benzo, and a muscle relaxant, which is what Soma is.
Yeah.
And you know, that was kind of a red flag when we see a doctor prescribe all 3 to somebody. We'd say, this is probably someone we need to look at. But that was the big thing, 12, 15 years ago, to get those 3 drugs.
I'll tell you what, in the late 90s, and wow. I mean, I literally would walk, I'd drive to Mexico. I'd tell my family I had to go serve subpoenas down in L.A. And I'd
keep going.
Well, you know, what are you going to do? And, you know, and I'd cross the border and I'd load my pockets up with, you really couldn't get Vicodin in the pharmacy, is that? But everybody thinks you can, but you really couldn't then. I don't know about now. But I'd load my pockets up with Soma for a penny a piece. You know, and bring back pocket loads.
Yeah.
And
that's scary.
Stuff kicks your butt.
That's scary today because, hey, we have, like, the reason we have, so part of DEA's job, I think everybody knows that we work the illicit drug problem, right? Criminal cases. We also have regulatory responsibility. We kind of alluded to it earlier, talking about buprenorphine and everything. Right. So there are protocols or procedures set up in this country. In order to get a controlled substance, you have to visit a doctor. A lot of times that has to be in person. You're going to get a prescription. You go to a pharmacy, you're going to hand them that prescription, or it's going to get sent electronically. You're going to get dispensed the drug. They're going to match the ID, whatever. A lot of foreign countries, none of those protections exist. Right. So people will go there, like you did back in the day, and hey, you don't know what you're going to get. Like, there's no, like, you know, don't purposely circumvent the protections that we have here because there's a reason that we have them. I'll leave it at that.
Right. Yeah. And what scares me a lot of times is the older generation, you know, that they're going into Mexico to get their insulin or to get, you know, some vitamins, whatever it is. My God, can you imagine what happens if somebody finds fentanyl in a vitamin that some 80-year-old bought?
Yep.
Holy Moses.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a whole nother disaster that could come our way.
Yeah.
Not good.
Yeah.
Not good.
A scary time.
It is. It is. God, Bill, this has been great.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is...
I learned a lot. I like talking to people who have real-life experience in treatment. And I think that's a real important connection to make is law enforcement and treatment, because we can talk about what we're kind of seeing, but you can talk about the effect it's having. And, you know, a lot of the things I even talked about today were from talking with people who used drugs.
Right.
And you know, the challenges as the drug supply changed, how their day-to-day life changed and their challenges changed. And and the fight to stay sober changed. You know? Yeah.
And that's kind of it's the relationship we have around here, around the valley with law enforcement and my good buddy sitting over there.
Yeah.
You know, they call me, I call them.
I'll vouch for them. They're good men.
They're good men. Yes,
right.
Absolutely they are. But no, we've got that relationship.
Yeah.
You know, and if they need to ask a question or if I need to, and it works out really well.
Good.
You know, we just hope we can just get this message even.
I know.
Hammer it home.
And hey, so let me ask you one more thing along those lines. Like, what is the message that's proper for teenagers today? Is it one of, because I heard you say earlier, hey, you can't just say no, right? Is it one of, I'd like to think, or where I kind of feel it is, and tell me if I'm wrong, is you got to give them information, empower them to make informed decisions. And then, like I said, if they make a bad decision, that's a different issue. You know, then you kind of have to tailor the message more toward those people that have made the bad decisions. But what do you tell teenagers today, do you think, that's going to be successful in keeping them away from the danger?
You know, when I speak in the classes, I just present my story. Mm-hmm. And I present to them, there's all these options out here. And like you said, there's empowering decisions and disempowering decisions. And it's tough. It's tough to, like I said, if it's there's certain students, and when I talk to them, I go, okay, pretty good home life for the most part, or, every home life, any teenager that goes, my parents are perfect, it's like, oh God, they're not leaving the house anytime soon.
Right.
But for the ones that, the hardest is those that the home life is the biggest issue. But I just try to present to them, look, you have these options. And you don't have to follow the path that was laid out to you.
Yeah.
And the hardest thing to convince them is, look, somebody put some bullshit in your head long ago when you're sitting and you're talking about yourself terrible, and you don't have to carry on that voice. And so I think for them is trying to present, you can find good community. You could find people doing positive things. Uh-huh. You don't have to go this route of acting a fool. I don't know how else to put it for them. But the decision's going to be yours. And I think a lot of them don't believe that if they screw up, that there's anyone they can go to that's lacking judgment. It's just like, okay, let's figure this out.
I think the first thing that when you're addressing students, like I said, I've been doing this a long time, they want to be talked to like adults.
Yep.
So you talk to them like adults. And you never tell them, you have to do this. It's more of, I'm letting you know, just like I said earlier, I'm letting you know what's going to happen to you if you decide to go down this road. And then all the in-between pieces are, it's so important. These kids want to, this is the only way I can put it, they want to hear the gore. They want to hear the blood and guts. Mm-hmm. There has never been an audience of kids that I've had that I haven't been able to control by telling my story. And you can't mince words with them. These kids are not the kids of the 50s, 60s, and 70s anymore. Right? And I think there's still teachers out there and parents out there that think they are.
Right.
These kids are bright. They're extremely intelligent. And then, of course, on the other side, they're dumb as rocks. But if you continue to undermine them, you're not going to get anywhere. You just got to tell them the truth,
right?
Because that's what they want to hear. I've had, and I'm just not saying this, I've had more kids come up to me afterwards to say thank you for telling that story. And again, it's because I'm everybody's grandpa age now, right? So I don't talk a lot into high schools anymore. I still do if asked, right? But it's all about eyeballing them. I pick kids out of the crowd. I will walk right up to, if I'm in a gym, I will walk right up to them. I'll point at them. There were two kids at Buchanan High School one time that were dicking around up in the audience, and there was 2,500 kids in there. I stopped the entire thing. I said, I'm going to wait for you two. I said, it's obvious you have something more important to say. They shut up, and it was dead silence in the place. And I had kids doing this, leaning over and listening. Again, it's my method. It's just not because of me, but it's the method. Treat them like adults. They're going to listen. Well, now, and if you and again, my philosophy: if we save one kid, we did our job.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's Flindt, you bring a good point. Don't insult their intelligence, but let them know there's greater wisdom ahead. I think that's a good way to kind of.
What does that mean? The second part of that, there's greater wisdom ahead. What do you mean?
I mean, how unwise were we in our teenage years about life and everything else? You know, I had some challenges with my own kids, and I said, look, you know, you're 14 and 13, and I'm only as wise as a parent 14 years. You know, so I'm learning as it's
That's
going too.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
You know, so I have a lot of life wisdom, but when it comes to some parenting things, you know, I'm still learning. So I think it's kind of, I mean, what do they say? Wisdom is where your intelligence meets application. And so I think they're not yet down that road far enough. Some are amazingly switched on. I mean, I know, Flindt, I've spoken to kids that have already been in and out of treatments.
Wow.
You know, 15, 16, 17 years old.
One more question for you guys. What role, because like I said, my experience is that especially with teenagers, a lot of it starts with mental health issues. What role does social media play in that world?
Huge.
Boom.
Yeah.
Huge. What's the best way to make it short? I know we both have had situations with it, but I try to explain to them, stop comparing your inside feelings to somebody's outside, your perception of their outside. I said, I've dealt with celebrities where it's like, oh, you know, this person could be a little late to the interview. They had to do a shoot and talking to the person, very nice looking lady, and she goes, yeah, I was taking pictures on this boat. Well, then looking and I'm like, oh, you own a boat? No. See, my agent, it's his friend, and he promised to just fill up some gas, so we got the thing. I'm like, it's all BS.
Right.
You're sitting here and looking at these people, and I said, I've known some very wealthy people that are miserable. And I've known some people that come home from work stinking to high heaven, and they're the happiest people on the planet. Stop comparing what you see to what you're feeling inside. And it's just, it is. And it gives the opportunities for them to be, I don't have any other words, greater assholes to each other. You know, it just does.
Just what we need.
It used to be, I used to have Bill, the kid that bullied me when I was little, come up to me. You know, didn't mean, but his name was Bill. He had to do that in person. Nowadays, they can sit and hide behind their computer and create fake accounts and their phones and everything else. It's just that.
And that's the thing. I along those lines, like I tell parents, like right now. So it used to be if a parent wanted to know who their kid was friends with, it's like who came to the door, or look out in the backyard, who's out there. Now AI is suggesting. That's the reality that, you know, AI is suggesting who your child should be friends with. And just know it's okay, but you better vet, you know, you better vet and understand like why that suggestion's being made. And the other thing, like specific with drugs, is people will say, parents will say, well, my kid never like looks at that drug content on social media. He doesn't have to like search for it. Just if his friends look at it, and if those friends are physically at the same location with him in a school all day, that algorithm is going to push that content to him. So he's going to be subjected to it. So you have to have the conversation with him about that, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, and think about it too. I don't remember. Oh, we were joking with that about Alonzo Bowden. We had the comedian on, and I said, yeah. And back in the day, I used to have to call, you know, hi, Mr. Andersen. Is Kimberly there? It's like not anymore. You know, parents don't even vet the relationships, and you know, it's a lot of these challenges. It's
But hey, one closing thing, it made me think of it earlier when you talked about you played golf and there was a young lady who's going on a golf scholarship. My wish for kids is they find something in life they're passionate. And this isn't a saying that I came up with. I think I heard Chris Angel say this, the magician. He said to kids, find something in life you're passionate about. Don't let drugs distract you from that passion, and don't ever let drugs become your passion. And when you look at the lives of people, you can see when they, you know, if they made missteps and, you know, hey, this person had a passion, but then they got distracted by drugs, then it just became all about drugs. You can really see that happen. So, you know, when I hear that someone's going to college to play golf at college, you know that they have a passion for it, and that's
There's nothing worse than wasted talent.
Yeah.
Nothing worse than wasted talent.
Yep.
And we're going to try to change that with a few kids.
Yeah. Good.
I'd like to close on a question for you. So how do organizations such as ourselves, obviously Flint's incredibly active, but even the average citizen lean into supporting folks?
I mean,
like
we have a whole toolkit available online, DEA.gov/1pill. And it's like PSA messages that there's no proprietary rights to, so anybody can grab them, use them. It's a lot of printed material. It's emoji decoders to help parents decode that language that we don't speak, that kids do speak. It's a lot of stuff like that. Now, if they want to do some in-person stuff, just call your local DEA office and talk. If you're part of an organization, call your local DEA office, talk about what you want to do, and ask to speak to someone about potentially partnering with them and getting the message out, because it's super important.
Yeah. No, thank you for that, because I think we've gotten so into a weird mode over these last 6 or 7 years. I bought a police officer coffee the other day in the line of Starbucks, and he threw his lights on, and I'm like, wait, what did I do? Are my tags out? And he comes to the window and goes, oh, I thought that was you. And it turns out I knew him. And he goes, thanks.
Right.
Sometimes law enforcement just needs to appreciate what you're doing.
Yeah.
We know it's tough for you guys out there.
We do.
Thank you.
Well, hey, thank you. Thank you for the thanks. And also thank you for you guys for actually trying to help people heal, keeping them in recovery. That's saving lives.
You got it.
Hey, here's the thing. With fentanyl now, you're either going to get help or what's going to happen?
You're going to die.
There you go.
That's it.
That's it.
Mr. Andersen.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you, guys.
Man, you're the best. I'm not kidding.
Appreciate it.
I appreciate you.
Yep.
All right.
Thanks,
Thank you.
sir.
Take care.
If you or a loved one is struggling with addiction, please call Parents and Addicts in Need at 559-579-1551 or check us out online at painnonprofit.org. Follow us on social media at Pain Nonprofit. Please subscribe to the podcast and share with others wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube. To donate, please click the link in the description and help us save more lives gripped by addiction.